July does not mean we need to throw in the towel. There is so much work that needs to be done in the garden to prepare for the fall garden, as well as a few crops that would be ideal to start now so that those beds are not sitting empty. I'm going to show you what seeds I am planting today, as well as talk about some of the ones I started the other day. Also kind of talk about how I am preparing the garden for the fall season. Let's get started. I do want to start out by saying I live in Florida, zone 9, so keep that in mind when you are seeing my plans for the future or how I'm talking about maybe some of the time that I have left, because our first frost does not happen until January. We probably will experience just a handful of days of frost through the whole year. Knowing how many days you have before your first frost day is going to be key in picking the appropriate seeds for your July garden. Now, this golden zucchini, for example, it only has 65 days before maturity. So that's 2 months and 5 days before you can start harvesting off this particular crop. That's really important to keep in mind. You don't want to pick out a crop that has maybe 120 days before harvest date if your first frost is much sooner than 120 days in advance. In this video, I'm not gonna just be talking about the plants that you can get started right now. I'm just showing you what I'm personally starting right now. We're gonna take a walk, a journey together, and you're gonna see exactly what I'm planting out, because it genuinely needs to be done. This is going to be our pumpkin patch. Now, if you're a current subscriber, you will know I intended for this to be our abundant corn area. What do you call it? Is it a corn patch? I don't know. I intended for this to be where we were going to grow all of our corn in abundance. That did not work out. So now I realize this is not the best place to grow corn. I'm going to instead grow the corn on like another part of my yard that has more full sun, because this does not have enough full sun. I thought it did, it didn't. So that's how you become an expert at gardening, is by becoming an expert at failing. So I do know this will be a great place for our pumpkins, because it gets some relief from the shade in the afternoon, and there is like a ridiculous amount of mulch down here. The pumpkins and watermelon, I have found, respond so well to mulch. I have had my most successful pumpkins growing as a volunteer from mulch, like just exclusively from mulch, because of course underneath is typically a little bit of like broken down soil. So that's what I'm doing right here. It's an incredible amount of mulch underneath, just a little bit of soil on top. We're gonna get our pumpkin patch going. Fingers crossed. I've got a pumpkin patch in October. Gotta pull out all this sad corn first. They tried their best. It just wasn't gonna work out. So I'm going to plant out my Big Max pumpkin seeds in this little patch right here. I feel like that would be a really good place, because they'd have plenty of room to sprawl out, and that would be a really good pumpkin patch. Now this area, I wanna say, is about 10 by 10. Right now I'm planting out some pinto beans. These are going to take anywhere from 90 to 100 days. And next to the pinto beans, I'm also planting black beans. Any of your bush beans are going to be a great option to start in the month of July. They have a really quick turnaround, usually less than 100 days. Another excellent crop to get started right now are your herbs. Think dill, cilantro, and basil. These are crops that we enjoy the most of at our home, and they also will produce very well through the summer season. So all through this side to arch up into the cattle panel, I'm going to attempt to do the winter luxury pumpkin again. Now these are only 105 days till from seed to harvest, and I got these from My Gardener. So the more you garden in your particular garden, the more you're gonna figure out what works for your yard or your climate and all of that. Because what works for me might not work for like somebody else in my neighborhood, let's say. So I'm growing the butternut squash because I know that these work excellent in Florida. The pest pressure was basically non-existent last spring, and I had more butternut squash than I knew what to do with. Summer squash is another really great crop you should consider starting right now for a more substantial vegetable to harvest, and you're going to get a really quick turnaround for most of these summer squash. There are even some varieties that are 45 days from seed to harvest. These particular ones are around 60 to 65 days from seed to harvest. Now I've got the gray zucchini, which is very flavorful. It's much more on the sweet side than other zucchinis that I have grown. And I also just like growing a nice standard golden zucchini. I'm gonna plant about 4 different golden zucchini plants. Do not underestimate how much one zucchini plant is going to provide for you. It is crazy. So I'm just gonna do 4 here, as I'm trying to keep this bed, these long rows mostly open for pepper plants. And then I'm gonna do the gray zucchini back here. I love the gray zucchini, and I always try to pick these like really crazy, funky vegetable varieties. I'm always attracted to that, of course. So it's like when I look at Baker Creek, if you're not familiar with them, rareseeds.com, it's like a kid in the candy store because their photography is so beautiful and inviting, and all of these really interesting vegetable varieties, you want to try them out. I have found that some of those really funky looking vegetable varieties aren't the most tasty ones, or maybe they're not the most disease resistant all the time, or they're just not, they've got their flaws. Let's just say that. Not all the time, but some of them. So the gray zucchini, I really would not have anticipated that it's actually, because of it being just so kind of like bland looking, such a sweet, delicious variety zucchini. So don't always just pass up the boring looking seed packs. Next, if you're wanting to start melons right now, like watermelon or cantaloupe, you still have a good amount of time to do that. What you'll want to do is pick those smaller variety options. I don't know if you guys see the common theme here. We're going for those smaller options, whether that is for your pumpkins or for your melons. The smaller, the less time it's going to take from seed to harvest. I love growing the sugar baby watermelons. These should take less than 100 days from seed to harvest, as well as most cantaloupe varieties. Now this particular variety only takes anywhere from 60 to 70 days, and that's the key here, is less than 100 days from seed to harvest. It is so hot out here right now. Other crops that I plan to get started would be my sugar pie pumpkins. Now, I have been trying to grow these sugar pie pumpkins for a few seasons now, and it has not been successful, but this will be a good time to start them because most of the pest pressure has come and gone by the time you start reaching maturity in the month of September. I'm also getting started my eggplants as well as my peppers and tomatoes, as I touched on before. Now, if you live in a colder climate, I wouldn't consider starting eggplants right now. They do typically take anywhere from 3 to 4 months from seed to harvest to start to produce fruit. Now, the reason I do say eggplant, if you live in a warmer climate, my zone is zone 9, it is very, very warm here, is because they love the heat. So those are heat-loving crops, as well as okra would be a really great crop to start if you live in a very, very warm climate. Tomatillos are also really great crops to start in the heat of summer that are going to have a really quick turnaround. I'm always surprised at how resistant tomatillo plants are and how quick they are to produce a massive amount of fruits. Crops that I would not start right now would be crops such as cucumbers, spinach, lettuces. Personally, I would steer away from starting those types of crops right now. You're just going to end up wasting seeds for the most part, and they're going to really succumb to the heat and any type of pest pressure. Let's talk about what we should be doing right now in the month of July to prepare ourselves and set ourselves up for success for the fall garden. This beautiful, well-maintained appearing bed looked just like this garden bed back here that is totally full of weeds. That was just a week ago. And I didn't pull a single weed. I will put the short up on how exactly I did that, but in short, no pun intended, all I did was put a layer of cardboard first, right on top of the grass, followed by about 3 inches of mulch, and then about 3 inches of mushroom compost. It doesn't have to be mushroom compost, it can be whatever compost you have access to. The name of the game is to suffocate the light from the grass or whatever weeds are causing you a problem. This is the time to start preparing your beds for the fall. Whether you're intending to have a late summer garden or a fall garden, there's a lot of preparation that can be done now to make your life easier. So if you are preparing your beds little by little, because it's a lot of work, what you'll want to do is one of two options. You'll want to either immediately start seeds in those beds, whether that's by transplant or by direct sowing, and get those beds full of plants. If you leave those plant beds empty with no foliage within the beds, you are just inviting opportunity for weeds to thrive, because there's nothing else there to take over, and those weeds are gonna take over. And then you're going to have to maintain that bed continuously until fall, and then just create more work for yourself. So your option one would be to load up your beds with seeds that I'm talking about today. Option two would be to cover them with cardboard, a really thick layer of cardboard, and let them just go to bed basically until fall, when you're ready to start planting out a fall garden. Now, what I'm doing for the beds behind me, for example, because I didn't have cardboard that was heavy enough and wide enough, as you can see, like the weeds are kind of popping out in certain areas where they can get to the light, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to try their hardest to find any access to the light. On top of the cardboard, I'm going to start putting a tarp over those beds, because I don't want to have to prepare a bed twice. I don't want to have to continue to work on these beds. And I know right now I'm not going to be sowing anything in them, because these particular beds are really prone to grass, and this is just not the season to try to nurture those beds. And I know in the summertime it's just not going to work with those ones. There are some beds in my garden that don't get super prone to grass and things like that I can start directly sowing a little bit of a late summer harvest. So it also is about knowing your garden. But I'm going to be covering these, which is going to kill off that season of weeds. And when I uncover them come September, that bed is going to be fresh and ready to start planting directly in the ground. And you might also be wondering, why isn't she just pulling the weeds? If you are new here, I do no dig, no till, and it saves me a ton of time as far as physically having to do things in the garden, because instead I'm basically covering up the weeds. And the more you do this and you stay on top of covering up your weeds, the less of a problem you're going to have year after year. So this bed is just going to go to sleep until September. I'm not even going to stress myself out with pulling all these weeds, because there's really no point. It's just going to come back literally next week. If you are gardening at any level of significant magnitude, where you're trying to homestead and grow most of your own produce, preserve most of your produce, all of that, you're going to want to find ways to make your garden work for you and not have you working for your garden. You've got to find a way to not overwhelm yourself and not want to quit and give up. So I have found with no dig, no till, that is the best way for me to want to keep it going and not be overwhelmed by weeds and the weed pressure that the summer season provides. I just continue to cover and cover and cover, whether that's with cardboard, whether that's with mulch, and also whether that is with a tarp. So me just covering up this bed, knowing that it's going to be a significant source of maintenance through the next few months, is just the way that I've got to do it to want to continue to garden. I'm only going to expand the garden into a functioning sense in certain areas that I know are manageable in the months of July and August. Now, what that might look for you if you don't have a significant sizable garden and you just have like a kitchen garden, is putting the beds to rest that have significant amounts of weed pressure or are susceptible to that through these particular months. Instead, get some seeds started in pots where you know you can really control those seeds and you can maintain weed pressure within those garden pots. You can help alleviate them from too much sun and control that environment more. Do whatever you can to pare down in these months so that you're not overwhelmed, while also maintaining the garden in a way that you're preparing it for the fall. All of my center beds right here, like I've already gotten started on this one and that one, those are going to go to sleep until September. The beds behind, I probably will try to revive those and sow seeds in those. Right here, for example, this bed, I don't know why, because it's surrounded by a lot of my like no dig, no till in-ground garden beds. It's so prone to grass. Now I've covered this with a really thick layer of cardboard followed by mulch. There's still grass popping out in between the areas that like the cardboard would meet another piece of cardboard. So I'm gonna put this bed to rest as well and cover it with a tarp. That way we're good to go in a few months and I don't have to continue to maintain it. This whole area that's like a true no dig, no till that I've really been maintaining with thick layers of mulch consistently, I'm going to be directly growing in because there's no problem and it's not going to stress me out and overwhelm me. I have started a whole new round of seeds for tomatoes. I started 30 new tomato seeds just 5 days ago and I checked on them right before I started filming today. I have a few sprouts, so I've just moved them to the light and I'm hoping to get all of my tomatoes going again here and then get some of my pepper plants going right here. Now, tomatoes and peppers are really good options for the months of July, especially if you live in Florida. I cannot tell you enough that you should be starting another tomato and another pepper round. Peppers love the month of September. They love that hot temperatures, but the more mild, like cooling that happens closer to October, you're gonna see those pepper plants just really starting to thrive and you will certainly have a great harvest through the month of October. Don't forget about your tomatoes and peppers in July. If you're considering starting another crop that will sustain through extreme temperatures, you'll want to consider starting loofahs. Now, these loofahs have done so well thriving in absolute neglect, extreme temperatures, inconsistent watering, and look at them. I've got multiple loofahs right there. I have loofahs laying on top and they're doing absolutely awesome. It's a really great way to cover up your cattle panel arches and also grow your own homemade sponges. On the surface, July can seem like a very tricky month and not a great month for gardening. However, there's so much potential if you really learn to maximize the month of July in the garden, or you can really start taking advantage of that in-between season and start planning out your fall garden, getting fall projects done to make your life easier in the long run. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Shelby, and until next time.